So how are we to understand survival of the fittest according to Spencer? Spencer has read Darwin. He's coined this phrase based on his reading of Darwin, but really he's a bigger fan of a competing theory of evolution. This theory is known as Lamarckism, not as well known today as it was in the 19th century when Spencer wrote. Lamarckism has been mostly disproved within the scientific community. Lamarckism is the idea that an organism can pass on to its offspring physical characteristics. Okay, so far so good, that Darwin agrees with that. But here comes the difference, that the parent organism acquired through the use or disuse during its lifetime. So this illustration of giraffes is commonly used to talk about Lamarckism. The idea is that if a giraffe during its lifetime has to eat the leaves high upon a tree, then by stretching its neck and by actually elongating its neck during its lifetime, its offspring will have long necks too. Not because of random mutation, as Darwin would have it, where the individuals born with longer necks simply thrive, can reproduce, and therefore are fitter than the people without that mutation. That would be Darwin's take. Lamarck's take is that a trait which you acquire during your lifetime, so which is not, as we would say today, genetically encoded, that a trait like that could yet be inherited by your offspring. So stretch your neck a lot during your lifetime and you will have long-necked babies as well. Don't stretch your neck. You are likely to lose that length in your neck and your babies will have short necks as well. Like I said, this theory has been largely disproven. It is Darwin's theory, which today is seen as the correct theory of evolution. But Spencer rather likes it. And he uses this term survival of the fittest, again, after reading Darwin, but really to describe a more Lamarckian process. And he applies this, like social Darwinists do, to human society. What is the result then? What is his interpretation of survival of the fittest as it applies to human society? Well, it goes something like as follows. The rich are rich because they are fit. Right, adjusted to their surroundings, like those long-necked giraffes. The poor are poor because they are not fit. Economic success is an indicator of excellence, and poverty, on the other hand, indicates inferiority. But how do you get economic success? Well, you get economic success through your lifetime on the market, as discussed earlier, proving your fitness through financial gain. If you're poor, you're not doing well on the market, right? You've been selected against, and no surprise that you then also pass on that trait to your offspring. So the rich and their offspring deserve their wealth because they are like those giraffes that tried really hard during their lifetime to get longer necks so they could reach those upper leaves. The poor and their offspring deserve their poverty because they're like the lazy giraffes who didn't bother to stretch their necks to reach the high leaves. To say that the rich don't deserve their riches is to punish those giraffes who tried really hard during their lifetime to get long necks, to punish them for all their effort and to unfairly support those lazy giraffes not reaching for the higher leaves. You see, of course, that none of this is scientific, but it is a rather pleasant metaphor for people with money and economic power, because it seems to indicate that you deserve that economic power, that you deserve your riches because of your merit. Survival of the fittest, therefore, tends to mean, within this framework, survival of the most deserving. And who's the most deserving? Well, those people who made it happen. Those people, those giraffes, right, who tried the hardest and therefore developed the traits that made them more successful, they deserve to be rich, and so does their offspring, right? Hence an argument for inherited wealth, because those traits that made them successful are passed on and they are inherently excellent. So whereas in natural selection, when we talked about those beetles, survival is not a matter of merit. Within the social Darwinist frame of thought, survival very much is a matter of merit. Quoting once again your favorite president, "The coal miner gets black lung disease," he said in a recent interview. "His son gets it, then his son." Black lung disease, if you're not familiar, is fairly obvious. If you work in the coal mines, then your lungs quite literally turn black from all the dust in there. It's very unhealthy work. "If I had been the son of a coal miner, I would have left the damn mines. But most people don't have the imagination or whatever to leave their mine. They don't have it. You're either born with it or you're not." Now, there's something very peculiar going on in this trait. Trump suggests that if he had been the son of a coal miner, he would have still ended up where he is today, with a lot of money and president of the United States of America. He would have wrestled himself out of that situation. But then again, he says, you're either born with it or not. If that in fact is true, then nobody can be blamed for their poverty, because if you're not born with it, how could you be blamed for not having it, whatever exactly that might be? This raises significant problems for that stereotype of the American dream, which is, of course, that no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, you can work your way up in society and in the economy and gain status, power, knowledge, etc. This duality, on the one hand, that idea of meritocracy, that if you have the ability, you will be able to rise, and on the other hand, the idea that you have it or you don't, that strange tension, of course, very much comes to the forefront in politics today. Another, perhaps yet more striking example of this kind of thinking is from Andrew Carnegie. No doubt you have heard of the Carnegie Foundation, which is a huge philanthropic organization. Now, strangely, even though Andrew Carnegie is the founder of this organization, he said stuff like this: "Every drunken vagabond or lazy idler supported by alms are is money, right, that you give out of charity, is a source of moral infection to a neighborhood. It will not do to teach the hardworking, industrious man that there is an easier path by which his wants can be supplied." In other words, you shouldn't give hardworking people free money because it will make them lazy. The less emotion, the better. In other words, don't have compassion for the poor. Neither the individual nor the race is improved by almsgiving, by philanthropy. Those worthy of assistance, except in rare cases, seldom require assistance. The really valuable men of the race never do. So in other words, if you need help, you're actually not deserving of help, because those deserving people actually already are doing quite well for themselves. A very strange thing to say for somebody who founded an organization which gives money to the more vulnerable parts of society. But here too you see that undercurrent of social Darwinism pop up. That idea that, well, if you're not rich, if you didn't make it in the world, if your family didn't, then perhaps you also don't deserve money. Because if you did, you would have it. Returning then to those global goals that were briefly discussed on Wednesday. If you look over these goals, then you will no doubt agree to their tremendous importance. But likely you will also see that most of those goals, though yes, they apply to all of us, are much more pressing for some people than for others. Most of us, and again, I cannot speak for you, but I'm going to make a few assumptions here. Most of us don't struggle with the extreme kind of poverty which we find in other parts of the world. Most of us, again, I'm assuming, do not often go hungry because we cannot buy food. We generally have good health, etc., etc. The fact that you're at Tilburg University suggests you're getting top quality education naturally. And again, you can go through all of these and see that we are relatively well off. I'm talking about this classroom here. And again, I'm generalizing because I don't know your particular situation, but I think you can see that those global goals listed here are most pressing for parts of the world, parts of the population that have a much harder life than we do. Exactly those parts of the population which, according to Carnegie, according to other thinkers in that vein of a more contemporary stamp, those parts of the population who, if they just tried a little harder, they would be better off. It is that idea that on the market, if you just do your best, just like in nature, you will make it. But you now know, having studied up on your natural selection from an actual Darwinian perspective, you now know that luck actually plays a much bigger role in where you end up in life. We know this from experience, but certainly if we want to use that framework of natural selection and we want to apply that metaphor, then we need to recognize that a lot more randomness comes into it. Where you were born, who your parents are, to this day is the greatest influencer on where you end up. So, returning then, in conclusion to that assumption, the belief that a life of dignity is a fundamental right is a belief that officially perhaps we all share. But if you look at certain policies, if you look at certain statements, and they're especially interesting today in the context of the pandemic, it turns out that a lot of people think that yes, sure, a life of dignity is important for everyone, but still it's a little more important for some than for others. Some deserve their dignity just a bit more than others. Now, what do I want you to do for the discussion this week? I'll set up a discussion board, and on that discussion board, I want you to post an entry where you discuss a current example of social Darwinism. Where do you see any aspect of this kind of thinking pop up in the contemporary debate? It can be directly linked to the coronavirus, that's perhaps the most obvious set of examples, but it can really be anything that comes to mind as you consider this way of thinking. Examples, big or small, it doesn't matter as long as you can clearly explain how it links up with the theory discussed this week. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I'm very much looking forward to your thoughts on the discussion board.